What is it about music that can transform your ordinary life into something extraordinary? What is it about music that can touch us so deeply and set in motion the wheel of our emotions? Whether we celebrate each other, nature, or the divine, our desire to express ourselves through music is ancient and a cultural universal. In this program, we will explore music from all over the world and speak with guests from musical, spiritual, scientific, and other realms in a quest to share and understand how music affects us. I'm your host, BRAUN, and this is Soulscapes.
The National Broadcasting Company invites you to listen to the music of Glenn Miller and his orchestra.
Radio is a magical invention that brings music and stories into our lives without us having to leave the comforts of our homes. Italian physicist Guglielmo Marconi is credited with pioneering the development of the wave-based system for our modern-day radio. But it was actually a Canadian who made the first audio radio broadcast to a general audience. On Christmas Eve 1906, Canadian inventor Reginald Fessender made a historic broadcast from Brant Rock, Massachusetts. The program included Fessender playing O Holy Night on the violin and reading a chapter from the Bible. His audience at the time consisted of shipboard radio operators along the Atlantic coast. Radio has come a long way since then. The 1920s saw a rise in commercial radio, and by the 1930s and 40s, radio was in its golden age, becoming the primary source of news and entertainment. Of course, radio played a pivotal role in a much darker era of our lives when it became a key carrier of propaganda and military communication during World War II. In the 1950s and 60s, television dominated entertainment and became a serious competition for radio. In our modern era, radio witnessed the birth of digital transmission. But despite this new form of broadcasting, radio remains an important voice for news, music, and talk shows. He is a Canadian from the East Coast who now calls Toronto his home. He is a broadcaster who was the music director and host of Toronto's iconic radio station Jazz FM for 25 years. He still hosts radio and plays the bass in a Canadian pop rock group. A man of many talents, Brad Barker, welcome to Soulscapes.
Thank you very much. I don't know how many talents those are, Audie, but I will take them. There's two of them, I guess, in there, but you're kind to say many talents.
Well, I think there's three: music director, host, and bass.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Great to be with you.
Thank you. I'm sure we're going to unearth many more talents. So let's just dive right into the fun. If I say music, what do you say?
You know, I say almost my whole life. I've been so blessed that from someone who picked up an instrument at a very young age, was able to somehow weave music and his love of music through a professional life that's led me to me speaking with you here today. So, of course, it also means the beautiful sounds I hear in my ear and all those great songs I love and all those things. But at its essence, for me, music is in some ways a lifesaver for a kid from the suburbs of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, who really didn't really realize what would become of it all. It just sort of took a leap of faith, and here we are. So whether it was being a professional musician or whether it was working at Jazz FM 91, I just feel like music has been a savior and something that I feel extremely blessed to have been able to make a career out of.
Mm. Of all of my guests, you're the first one who's actually said those words savior. And that's a big word and it can mean many things to different people. But you've kind of answered my second question, and that is, what does music mean to you? So obviously it had I mean, one can say remedial in so many ways, but savior, it's like, would you care to elaborate a bit on that one?
I just have no other idea of how things could have gone for me. As it's I think it's funny too, because when you're a young person, sometimes when you're 11 or 12, you say, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a famous actor, right? You shouldn't really be planning your lifelong career at that age. But I said I wanted to be a musician at that age, and that actually kind of came true. And I know for so many other people, like so many people pick up instruments, so many people have a dream of having success at some level doing this, and it doesn't always work out. So many things have to fall into place. I put luck in there to a great degree. I was never the greatest bass player in the world, but was able to do the job, and then was able to find situations that were advantageous for me to be in with good people that I liked. And again, just for me, when I say it saved me, it just feels like I don't know what would have happened without the opportunities that came through playing music. Let's say there
Right.
was no fallback plan. Let's say that.
So it's like it was a big anchor for you in your life too, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
It defined me, as it does so many people when you're in junior high school and high school. But once I found music, you felt like I had a thing. I wasn't the sports guy. I
right.
wasn't I wasn't the guy that had the best grades. But once me and my team picked up instruments and started playing at, variety shows at our school, and it became something that you get identified with, and something that you can hang on to and feel personal about. And that was extremely important to me
Mm.
as a young person, and sort of gave me a little bit of fortification that I kind of needed as I moved through the next phases of my life.
Mm. So let's stay with that nautical theme of anchor and take you back to your childhood in Cole Harbor. You see where I'm going there, outside of Halifax. Um, I've actually never been to the East Coast other than Prince Edward Island, but
That's good.
East Coast probably, yeah. But what was that like growing up in Cole Harbor?
A lot of people, when I say I'm from the East Coast, or from what people think is Halifax or a suburb, a lot of people think it's all lobster traps and lighthouses, and but ultimately where I grew up, it was cookie cutter suburbs that had very little sass to it. It was the houses were the same. We played road hockey, and it was a pretty. You could pick that existence up. I think you could go to any small Canadian town, and it would be very, very similar to that. The fortunate part was, I owe so much, again, when it comes to luck, is to having friends that were investigating music in a way that I wasn't. So I had a friend that was getting into a lot of British ska music and starting to play drums, and another musician who was starting to fall in love with Genesis and these progressive bands. And for me, I was just like, it was so great to have these influences in my life that maybe wouldn't have been there naturally. Back at that time, you had AM radio. When you're in Cole Harbor, Nova Scotia, with AM radio being your sort of your gateway to music, you have to you have to sort of fight to look at other places to find things that are interesting. And luckily, I had some good influences around me that also helped me discover music that I wouldn't have found on my own. So it was a lovely upbringing. It was all street hockey and good times, and those things. But ultimately, once we started to move along with me and a couple of key friends, it became very music centric for the back end of our kind of time in Cole Harbor.
No, I've just only seen pictures of Cole Harbor because when I read up on you, I wanted to know, where is it? What does it look like? Of course, you did have the beautiful land and seascape, albeit maybe a little bit rugged. Was that like an important part of your growing up as well?
I would say, mainly when other relatives came to visit us, we would go to
Right.
places like that. But when we were just there, we were just kind of living our life and going to the Tim Hortons. So it was adjacent and something that was very present, but not something that we were sort of marinating in all day long.
Oh, yeah. So Nova Scotia is known for its folk music traditions, particularly fiddling. So I've heard. So take us back to your childhood. I know you just talked about bands forming in high school, but maybe perhaps earlier memories of music in your home or anywhere else. I don't know whether you went to church or whether there were hootenannies. Just take us back to some of that.
Well, it's funny because my folks, I was actually born in Montreal, and my folks dragged us out to the to
Oh,
Nova Scotia. Yeah, so I was a very young person when we got there. So my parents don't have a lot of the whatever the threads of being a maritime are either. When you talk about that kind of traditional, that Scottish music, that Celtic music, those things weren't necessarily in their DNA, but it was everywhere when I was growing up. There you if you turned your back long enough, someone would pick up a fiddle and start doing something or clogging. My dad was even though he was born in Montreal, his folks were from Newfoundland too, so he had sort of this back. So he had the spoons out occasionally. We had a piano in the house.
famous spoons.
The spoons, my dad he could rock those spoons like nobody's business, especially after a couple of beer. So there were those elements of it. But I would say my parents, their record collection was pretty middle of the road. There was a lot of Jerry Vale, and there was a lot of Engelbert Humperdinck and Tom Jones and these kinds of artists that sort of were in my parents' library. So there was music there, but it took a little more diving on my part to maybe get to the next layer of what was available musically out there.
Right. Now you mentioned AM radio before, but so I wanted to ask you, did you grow up listening to the radio? Like, is it something that you did together as a family or by yourself or in groups? Like, and what kind of things would you listen to?
Yeah, it was definitely we on my own. We didn't listen to it together, but by the time I got to be maybe 13, there was an FM station that came, if you can believe it, C100, that opened up the door a little more. There was Brave New Waves, which was on CBC Radio at night too, which was a real eye opener too, because the music was extremely different than what I was hearing on radio. But yeah, I loved the hits of the day, and I was the kid who had the recordable player that would sit there and wait. They'd say, coming up in a while, the new song from the Police, and I would
Right.
sit there with it in record and ready to unpause it as soon as the guy said, "Here is every little thing she does is magic," and you got a recording of that song that you had taken yourself on a cassette. So radio was absolutely a really big part of it. And Adi, I didn't think about it until later on. I worked in radio, but I remember
Right.
those voices of those guys that I remember growing up listening to. They had a real impact, and I do remember the feeling of feeling as if potentially we're friends in some way. Those friendly voices on the radio always were very impactful for me as a young person too.
Well, it's okay. So there's the magic there. It just reminds me when I was a teenager growing up in, well, actually, a young child from age 2 to 19 in Germany. I remember hearing my first, because I had a classical background, symphonic, an orchestra playing in the radio. And I actually thought that there were very small people in that box. And I dreamt about it and I couldn't, like, how do they all fit in there? And how do they bring their instruments? I just want to go back to I understand that you went to university to study jazz, not necessarily to become a jazz musician, but to study the field. Now, what is it about jazz that intrigued you so much or that you love so much?
I just want to, on your point, I didn't think they were in the radio, but I did think the band was at the radio station playing when I heard something.
Good.
So it was one step removed from the way that you thought about, but I thought every time you heard a song on the radio, the band was actually down the road in that building playing it. Well, so the beautiful thing, and I'll give him a shout out here, my friend Kevin Vino, who I don't speak to as much at all, but he's a musician here in the city and someone I grew up with in Cole Harbor. He turned into, like, he was a jazz listener at a very young age. So and he was a guitar player, so it was all there was Lenny Breau records, there were Ted Green, Lenny Barney Kessel, Herb
Mhm.
Ellis, all these great. So he was consuming that stuff, and through there I started to develop a love of the jazz too, because it sounded great, and then there was more modern stuff that he started to get into, and then we got into. So for me, when I decided to go to Saint FX, which is a very pretty close trip from where I lived, which was 3 hours away. That had a role, but it also
Hmm.
had one of the most robust jazz programs in the country at that time. It was a lot of instructors for not very many people who were there who would go to Antigonish, Nova Scotia, very isolated, very small little town, just on the other side of Cape Breton. And all the instructors were mostly Toronto musicians or people from the States. So they had a really, really terrific program. So for me, it felt like, a soft landing, something that I could tell my parents I was going to university. I was studying, it all seemed very sort of buttoned down and kind of proper. So that was good. It also got me out of the house and living on my own and really taking a leap of faith to be there and to study the music. So I always knew that the level of dedication that you needed to be a jazz musician might not, and the talent I think I knew early on that I think is something I knew that was not in my skill set. And especially when I got there too, I think we both know a gentleman by the name of Mike Downs, who's a great bass player.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Mike was at St. FX the same time I was there. He was there a year above me. He was from Winnipeg and studying there, and we shared a practice space. Mike was a real way for me to gauge the level of dedication that you needed. Mike was at it 8 hours a day, that practice space. I could barely get in there because he was and that was a real eye opener going, oh, you want to do this? This is what you need to commit to. And certainly his career has panned out in that
Right.
way. He is one of the best bass players in our country.
Mm.
But so it was a great environment to be in. Ted Warren was there while I was there. So some really heavy players happened to be in Antigonish in 1985 when I was there. So it was a great pool to be in, to swim in it, to know your place in it, to be inspired by it. And those things kind of, again, were great springboards. That my experience at that university was, again, I can't thank it enough.
So after you graduated, you actually toured a little bit with a band. Can you tell us more about those musical adventures?
So when I finished university, me and another friend of mine, we knew that if you really wanted to take at least your shot at doing this on a professional level. We had seen so many great musicians who had been in the Maritimes that had wonderful careers, but we really felt like let's go to Toronto and just at least let's take a peek at what that world is like and
Mhm.
see, what our place may be in it. So we came here, we started, being busboys at the Bamboo, and making our way. And it was through a whole series of great coincidences and luck again that I got an opportunity to audition for a band that at that time was just coming off a platinum record. They were about to release their second record. They had a deal in America, a band called The Pursuit of Happiness,
Yeah.
and after a couple of rounds of auditions and lots of people, I was, extremely blessed to get that gig. And for a kid from Cole Harbour to sort of all of a sudden get on the tour bus and go to America, go to lots of different places and play shows where people were showing up and enjoying the music, and it was incredibly exciting. And it was, from 1990 till 1996, it was the greatest joy of my life to be out there on the road with people I still consider to be great friends, and we still play together to this day. That experience was everything. It was seeing the world. It was pretending that you're a rock star. It was all those kind
Mhm.
of fun things that you kind of think about and dream about. So it was again an incredible. I always say if you can be in a somewhat successful rock band in your 20s, it's a really fun time to do it. I can't recommend it highly enough.
So that went on for how many years would you say you're touring?
So we toured until about 96, and then things wind down, and that's when it's tough because for me, I was in my early 30s, and
Right.
something I had thought would potentially be that would take me to the finish line was kind of over. And you really I had to repivot at that particular time. And me and our singer-songwriter Mo Berg, we had started doing most of the press that we had done. We'd go to the radio stations, and I've always felt that I wasn't mic shy. I wasn't I could have fun with people and banter and those experience. Sometimes I would leave a radio station and the guys, whoever was interviewing us, the host or hostess would say, you're really good on the radio. You're fun. And I always sort of put that in the back of my mind. So
Mm.
when things did sort of wind down with the band, I thought, you know what, am I young enough to still try to do something that I love and not just something that I feel I better lock it down now and get a real job. So luckily Humber had that, which just stopped this past year. They had this great program, and if you were a mature student, let's say, quotation marks, they had a fast track program for you if you'd been to university before. So yeah, as a 30 plus guy who had some success in a band, I was now in school at Humber College, taking that broadcasting degree, and that set up the next arc of my life. So all credit to Humber again as well.
So you do the degree at Humber, and then, I mean, I know this from my own experience. You don't just sort of simply hang out your shingle, right? There has to be, there has to be availability in a rather small field. But
Yep.
just take us through like exactly what happened once you graduated. Did you instantly get a job, or did you have to wait and brood and pivot again? Because I love your imagery of pivoting.
It's been a constant, and it seems like in my life. But I think the best part about going back to Humber, especially as a 30-year-old, school always had this. You have these memories of high school, and I got to go do my homework and get home. And when I went there as a 30-year-old, this was business. This I was there to learn. I was there to it was all hands on deck here. This wasn't so for me, all the instructors who were there, and they all worked in the industry, who were teaching there, every day felt like a job application. If I was going to school and whoever was teaching us, they happened to work at this radio station or that radio station, I didn't know if they would necessarily give me a job, but I certainly thought that they would. I wanted to make a good impression on them because that just seemed like, this is why we're here. We're here to get jobs. Basically, we're not just here to go to school. So when I graduated from Humber, and I did quite well there too. I got some some awards, some things that made me feel like that this
Don't
was.
be shy. Don't be shy.
I,
You got some
I,
awards?
there were some awards and some things because of the marks I got and some of the projects I did, and it was some money and stuff like that. So these things were very encouraging to me, thinking that maybe this is the right call. But at that particular time, as soon as I got done, I had another friend who I'd grown up with in the Maritimes. Her name's Melanie Doan, and Melanie is speaking of
Sure.
fiddle, great fiddle player, great songwriter, performer, won a Juno Award, and Melanie said, "Would you like to come out on the road and join my band for a while?" So before I started even looking for a broadcast job, I was like, I'm going to take an opportunity when it comes. And it was such a joy too, because her brother Creighton, and Melanie are people that I'd grown up with, and I'd never really been in a professional kind of touring environment with people that are very good friends and people that you have a deep memories with and
Right.
lots of memories with. So it was a joy to do that for about another year and a half, and we toured extensively, and it was again a great opportunity and really fun. But then after that, things got real, and that's when it was time to sort of look for a broadcast gig. And luckily, I got an internship at the time was called Talk 640, and I think it's AM 640 now, the sister AM station to Q107. And I got an internship there in the news department, and just was doing whatever I was asked of, and this is exactly what an internship would be. But then all of a sudden there was a posting. Marcia Lederman, who worked there, who's a great broadcaster, she writes for the Globe and Mail now. She was looking for a producer, and I was
Hmm.
absolutely completely unqualified to be anyone's producer. But for some reason, she allowed me the opportunity. I think it's probably salary based because but she gave me this incredible opportunity to be her producer for her afternoon drive show. And so that was the first real paying job that I had. And she was wonderful to me. She taught me so much about the nuances of radio, and Jim Cochon, who also worked on the show too. So really thrown into the deep end of the pool, but a great experience. And then through that, someone else I had gone to Humber College with started working at Jazz FM 91, or what CJRT was at the
Right.
time. And he said that they were going all jazz. They were morphing from their kind of hybrid kind of format that they had, all kinds of different stuff, a little bit of jazz, but they had classical and folk and
Hmm.
blues and some talk programming as well. They were going to go all jazz, and the guy that I had gone to Humber with, who was working there, had got in the ear of the CEO at that time, Chuck Camrew, and he said, I went to school with a guy. He went to jazz school, and he's broadcasting, and he got a meeting. I had a meeting with Chuck, and kind of I don't know what I said to him, Audie, because I was probably out of my head trying to pretend what you're supposed to do when you're
Good for
pitching
you.
pitching yourself to someone, which I had no experience with, but just let them know that I really felt that the one thing about jazz is I think sometimes who the people who present it sometimes present it in a way that makes people who listen to it feel like it's over their head. That you have to be part of some club to enjoy the music. That you have to know what a diminished scale is or what chord structures are before you have any business. And for me, I was always just a very user-friendly kind of guy. I was like, this music is for everyone. You don't have to know anything about this. If it goes in your ear and you like it, then you like jazz, and you don't have
Right.
to know Miles Davis from, Miles Goodwin. I think he liked that kind of approach, and he gave me an opportunity to come on board there just as they transitioned to being an all jazz radio station back in 1991. And they let me hang around for the next 25 years, and I'm not quite sure why.
At what point did you feel, or did other people feel, you've got what it takes to actually carry a show?
You know what? It's a good point because I didn't. It felt like to me if you go there, you want to just that the opportunity of being in radio can be a million things, and I was open to whatever there was. I think to me, if you narrow it and say I only want to be a host, you're setting yourself up for some kind of disappointment, or you're being too narrow in what the possibility of the job is. So I didn't stream. You stream yourself in your second semester there. Like you go, I'm on air, I'm production, I'm news, I'm sales,
Okay.
and I didn't pick the hosting duties. I picked news because it just felt like you're going to have to cut audio, you're going to have to tell stories, you're going to have to talk to people. You're still going to be hosting as well, but that'll just be one part of the thing. It felt more 360 to sort of take that stream as opposed to hosting. I don't really know how much they can teach you to talk and be on mic. They can manage your pee popping and maybe some of your sizzles, but it does seem like it's something that has to be somewhat natural. You have to have some kind of, I don't know if you can be taught how to be an engaging host. Not to say that I am. I'm just saying. So for me, it didn't seem like that would be the best place to put my energy. So I definitely didn't think about hosting. And when I went to Jazz FM 91 or CJRT at the time, I wasn't hired as a host either. It was kind of ambiguous. It was just sort of, here's a guy who knows about jazz, who might help us transition into this sort of new digital world that's coming. So it was unplanned either. And all those things just sort of happened very organically at the radio station. Maybe doing a little hour here and you do that. And it's like, okay, that's not terrible. Let's give him another hour. That's not.
But pivoting and being fluid is what I hear, right? So if you like the atmosphere, if you like the craft, you're going to want to do whatever is happening because you're learning constantly. But at some point, something must have happened. Was there a sudden offer? Was someone on mat leave? I'm just making anything up. No, Brad, you got to do this. Or did you say, I have an idea for a show? How did that come about?
Yeah, it was very much, it was so much about the climate of Jazz FM at that time. So there was so much transitioning going on, and Chuck was moving so many pieces of different puzzles around, it really redefining what the radio station was. So I don't know if anyone ever, it was definitely more about, we have a hole to fill. Can you please try to fill it? As opposed to, you're dynamite. We'd like to get you on the air. So it was on a need basis. And luckily I was a guy who had said yes to everything because there was no place for no's in this new opportunity. I was going to take on whatever it was. And if I failed, I guess that would be the cost of doing business. But I was definitely in the yes business. So every time it was, can you do this? Can you do that? It was like, yep. And that worked to a slow evolution of going from a couple of hours on the weekend to hosting a show called Dinner Jazz, which now Mr. John Devenish does such a great job doing in the evening, to eventually taking on the afternoon drive role at the station.
So, yeah, but you filled the hole, and then, of course, they saw that you were dynamite. So we know the rest is history. Now, you do still have a presence on Jazz FM. Are you cooking up anything new? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, sure. I'd love to. Yeah. So we're going to start doing something on Sunday mornings. Me and my friend, his name is Jeff Babko, who came on with me every Monday for the last 5 years on the station, who's from Los Angeles, and He is the keyboard player on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. He's also Martin Short and Steve Martin's musical director, and we have developed a real fun relationship. He is just an incredible, wonderful man first, and so knowledgeable about music, and an incredible musician as well. So we're going to kind of just share the hour with some music that we love and talk about the music that we love. So that's coming up, depending on when this airs, sometime in November of 2025.
Fantastic. Something to really look forward to. Now, what have been some of the highlights and most memorable moments of your broadcasting career?
There's one that really sticks out. I grew up loving Pat Metheny as much as people love the Stones or whoever they love. As when I always feel like the people that you really love when you're 11, 12, those music memories are the ones that sort of are the most powerful, that stay with you your whole life. And I just fell in love with Pat Metheny's music, and I loved it my entire life. And the first time that he came into the station to sit down with me on Afternoon Drive, once I was able to get my nerves straight, it was one of the most satisfying conversations I've ever had, to be able to talk to one of your musical idols with that kind of familiarity, and with him being so engaging. And I just walked away from that moment thinking, if this was all over now, this would have, if you would have told the 12-year-old Brad that he's sitting in a studio in Toronto on Jazz FM 91 interviewing Pat Metheny for an hour and having it go pretty well, then absolutely that was one of the absolute highlights of my broadcasting career. And Pat, all the way down, there's so many incredible people that I grew up listening to, whether it was Al Jarreau or Mike Stern or Harry Connick Jr. Like we did for a lot of the time there. Everyone that is really a big time jazz artist would come through that place, and I'd have a chance to speak with them. All those conversations, I think, were the things that were always the most gratifying as I got in my car and went home at the end of the day thinking that I think we did a pretty good job today.
Could there be a book in that, Brad? Like your memoirs or something like that?
Well, I think there could be. I don't know. I sometimes think my life can be interesting to me. I'm not sure how many other people, and I think sometimes you need a certain kind of ego or something that tells you that the world wants to hear your story to drive you to do something like that. And at this particular point in my life, I'm not quite sure if I feel that the world is waiting for the memoirs of Brad Barker.
Well, you never know. But speaking of our crazy world, in this world of very digitized music and AI, which is a scary and interesting phenomenon that is taking over, do you think that live radio still has a role to play?
I was thinking about that, and I think anytime you have a conversation, and if people are listening to this conversation and they are engaged in what we're talking about right now, then we're basically saying that radio does have validity, because that is, in essence, when you're doing it right, that is, you're telling a story, or you're providing people with something that goes into their mind that allows them. To me, it's much more like reading a book than it is like watching TV when you listen to the radio, because your mind is engaged in a different way. It's not visual. It's a little story that's happening in your body, in your own mind. So that kind of personalness, that kind of feeling that an audience can have listening to a conversation, I think it will never go away. When we talk about podcasting, in some ways, that's a pretty short drive to what radio is at its best. And I think live especially, I think, does have a certain sass when we live in such a prepackaged world where you're basically always getting something that has been buffed, something that has been, all the errors have been taken out, everything's been shined, everyone is looking their best, that sometimes when you just turn on the mic and have a conversation that potentially could go all kinds of different directions. And it is someone thinking on their feet. And it is the reality of how most of us live our lives. That's how we have conversations. We don't pre-prepare anything. That I think that those are the kinds of things that draw people in. And I think the live element draws people in. So we'll be coming up with whatever the definition of radio is moving forward. But I think people will always want to get in their car and be engaged by some kind of content of people sharing stories that they can relate to and that make them feel grounded or make them feel
included.
included, that we're the same. There's someone just like me.
Yep. Yep.
That kind of power, I think, is in the hands of radio, and I don't think that's going anywhere.
Here, here. So here comes this quote that before we actually got into the interview, I thought I was going to share because you alluded to it anyway. This is a quote from the famous English and American writer Alistair Cook. I'm not going to say it in a British accent. I'm just going to say it the way I read it. I prefer radio to TV because the pictures are better.
See,
Right?
ones he's making up in his mind, the
Yeah, and the ones we hear, like if you're putting on a great piece of music, like you're the one who is saying we're now going to listen to XYZ, whatever the genre is. Listener listens, but images will pop up right away. We don't need TV. We don't need Instagram. It's an internal image that is so much your very own, and it's not created by anyone else except you, right?
it, I think it has more power that way. You're generating your own show, your own memories, and I think absolutely that is. I sometimes when I would meet listeners over the course of being there, the sound of your voice, and as you know, working in radio, it can be extremely powerful for people. And sometimes when I would meet them, you could see in their face, not necessarily, but the moment they go, that's the guy that I've been listening, that's been speaking those words that I've been listening to in my home or my car. And I never knew what that guy looked like. I had lots of they had their own vision of what that
Of
guy looked
course.
like, or what he was like, or all the things that go into that. And I always love that moment that when you go, hi, I'm Brad Barker, and someone who maybe have listened for a long time, and they sort of have to do a recalibration of what they thought versus the reality versus how they'll move forward now when they listen again. So those are moments that always let me know how powerful radio is, that they have already in some ways constructed some kind of model of who you are visually in their head, whether it's abstract or whether it's real, but it's something that they have very personal, and now they have to sort of confront the reality of what they're getting. So those images, that theater of the mind, is what we always say with radio. Is it's extremely powerful for listeners.
Oh, for sure. Can you share some of the most transformative and uplifting moments in your life that involved music or the radio? Just something where you felt I have been transformed or uplifted.
The ground zero is when I had done those multiple auditions for The Pursuit of Happiness, and especially back then in my early 20s, you want something so bad that you're just pining for it. You're going to bed every night just dreaming that it can happen. And I remember getting the phone call from Mo, and I picked it up, and he said, "Hey, you got the gig." And you could have told me you just won the lottery and here's $1 million, or you just got the gig, and I would have taken the gig at that point. It was so transformative. So I just remember feeling in that moment that there was some kind of validation, that there was some kind of path forward, that there was a future in front of me. So that for me is number one. And I would say the opportunity, it wasn't quite the same kind of blast, but getting the job at Jazz FM 91 is again someone who was kind of stumbling into a second arc of his career, not real lot of uncertainty. But I knew that I loved jazz. I knew this would be a great place for me to hopefully work and have some kind of influence. And I remember when Chuck, God rest his soul, offered me that job. Both of those times felt like, again, I'll go back to the word validity, because I think until there was that kind of reality, I could easily dismiss myself in a lot of different ways. I needed that external validation to make those things seem real, whether that's good or bad. That's just who I am. And those two moments for sure let me know that A, as a musician, I was on the right road, and then B, as a broadcaster, I was on the right road.
And certainly, I'm sure over the years you've heard from listeners too. I remember I did when I was in the radio, and it does make you feel good that you've mattered to other people because you've brightened their day. It's a very powerful thing to know that what you are doing creates a feeling for somebody that makes their day easier,
It's
more
it's
joyful. It's incredible.
it seems like in some ways it's in the world we live in now, that's one of the best things if you can make someone's day a little better.
Yeah.
It's such a win. I would say, we're talking about, monumental music moments or things that happen. When I decided to move away from my afternoon drive job and music direction job there this past summer, Audie, it was unbelievable how generous people were of spirit. I literally got hundreds of emails from people, and people put a video together with a bunch of musicians who talked about the importance of whatever me playing their music or how I had approached my job over those times. And I can be dismissive sometimes of those things, but it was so overwhelming that I could not ignore it. It was so gratifying, and people were so honest in the way that they shared what having my voice in their home meant. People had talked about, our daughter was born when you were on the air. Now they're in high school. We still listen to you in the car with a high school student. That was, these types of, especially when you have time spent like that, like decades on the air, and if people come along for the ride, you're part. You're the backdrop to so many things that go on in their lives, and people will talk about, their parents passing or
Milestones.
milestones, seminal moments that for
Hmm.
some reason you played some kind of role in, whether it was, as a soothing tone after something bad happened, a celebratory tone when something good happened. But nothing was clearer to your point about the effect you have on people than when I decided to move away, and people were extremely generous in how they let me know what the effect the show had on them listening to it.
If you had to choose 3 or 4 pieces of music that you go to for upliftment, I mean, how are you going
How
to do
dare
that?
you?
How dare we? What? But if you made a mini Brad Barker playlist
No
of
boy.
something you do in your home when you're feeling blue or when you're full of joy and you want to celebrate it with music, what kind of pieces come to mind?
It can be so many different things. It is a very tough question, but you know what? You got to sometimes you just got to put them down and say this is. But you know, the Beatles still have an incredible amount of musical sass for me. So I'll put on Rubber Soul. You Won't See Me is a tune that would always is always a good one for me. Speaking of Pat Metheny, if Phase Dance from the original The White Album with his group album from the '70s, a tune called Phase Dance is something that is always, as many times as I've heard it, is always something that makes me feel good. Milestones from Miles Davis, the brightness of that tune and Cannonball ripping into that solo right off the top, just feels like a plane's taking off, and it's something that I still love a lot. And I'm a pop guy too. I grew up loving Miles Davis as much as I did Van Halen and the Police. So, but to me, if I really need the thing, there's a song by the New Radicals called "You Give What You Get," and to me, I think it's one of the great songs ever written, and that is a guaranteed perennial. Or I'll just throw on "Talking Book" from Stevie Wonder from start to finish, and then that'll change the course of my day as well. So it can be all those things all at once, and probably I forgot about 300 more that I should have said too.
That's fine. You know what? I will list the songs that you mentioned. Just say these are some of Brad Barker's picks, and
Thank you
then
very much.
people will get all excited. But it's amazing how often Stevie Wonder does come up. I mean, we're talking about music with incredibly powerful messages, right?
Mm. Yeah, I think when I heard Stevie for the first time and started to realize how much he was doing on all the sound of his voice is enough. Oh, he wrote the songs. Oh, okay. Oh, he played drums and bass and keyboards and guitar and produced everything. And this one man band thing with music that was so powerful and just catchy at the end of the day as well. I think that's when I first realized there's people out there that are really talented at a level that's frightening. How much musicality they have in their bodies and in the fiber of their being.
That is so true. Brad Barker, you've been an absolutely wonderful guest. Thank you so much for joining me today on Soulscapes.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
From north to south and east to west, music inhabits every corner of our world and beyond. I hope you've enjoyed my conversation with musician and radio broadcaster extraordinaire Brad Barker. I'm Audie BRAUN, and this is Soulscapes.